Nice.
Mhm.
Um, but so it's been like a tool to help, like do wine education, but it's also been a sneaky way for me to learn about things that I feel like I should know more about, and like do things that I need to pick up more information on and stuff. And that's why I'm doing the Jura, because I don't know enough about the Jura.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I'll ask Zev if he wants to just talk to me about the Jura and tell me stories about the Jura. So,
Okay.
so
Well,
here we are.
hopefully, I don't know that my knowledge of the Jura is necessarily very, book proper,
Yeah.
uh, but I know a lot of people there, and I go there all the time, so I
Yeah.
can give these sort of, an anecdotal experience and some, wine thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's better because like every time I do these, I read through all my wine books and I'm like, oh boy, it's great to know what was happening 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's,
I actually
you know,
kind of have a fun, I'm always trying to buy old wine books, when I'm around in France or in America or whatever. And I mostly do it so that I could read what the Jura section was at like the year that it printed.
yeah.
And it's very interesting to see, it's one of these regions that's had, amazing revolution over, the last 50, 100 years.
So why is it, why has it changed so much? And like, why are you looking at that?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about it, I mean, in one way, it's changed a lot thanks to the natural wine movement. The natural wine movement has like nuclear centers, where somebody will start a thing. We talk about Beaujolais all the time, where Lapierre and Foillard and Jules Chauvet and those people started the revolution of natural wine. And, the same thing basically happened in the Jura with Pierre Auvernois. And he was sort of a luminary in this small village in Poupien. And if you look at, the map, and I saw you sent all that stuff, Poupien is sort of a sub-appellation, just up in elevation from Arbois, which is considered like the best major appellation in the Jura, though that's not necessarily true. It's just sort of like a historical standard. And because this is such a small region, this, one guy had a lot of influence, and a lot of people around him tasted the wine and were really moved by it. And, if you look at the way vineyards are in a lot of like traditional French regions, but especially in the Jura, they're all together, and they're chopped up into ownership. And so, Pierre Auvernois and the Houillon Auvernois wines are famous, but they're exact direct neighbors. Their vines are completely surrounded by other people with other vines, and so there's a lot of interaction in the farming between what he was doing and what was going on, immediately around him. And so he was sort of able to like have an influence, and that sort of happened in the 80s, and really evolved into the 90s when Stéphane Tissot took over for the domain from his family. And he grew that, over his history from, I don't know, 25 hectares to 55 or 60 where it is now, and all in biodynamics and all in a really great way. And so sort of like the big powerhouses of the Jura, the big producers, which were like Henri Maire and people like that, have basically gone out of business. And Stéphane Tissot has become the big guy. And, he farms beautifully and makes wonderful wines, with really natural method. And so there's been a big evolution, in like in the power structure of the Jura. And if you look at the percentage of land that's grown organically compared to not, I think it's one of the highest ratios of anywhere in France. Also, because we're talking about a small region, I think there's 2,000 hectares of vines in the Jura, something like that. It's tiny for an entire wine region. And so, you get a couple people doing something, with some influence, and it changes the area on a pretty significant scale.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at the map here, and this must be like not even 20 miles north to south. and I know that
it's not 20 miles north to south, but if you were to drive from Arbois to Rotelier, which is like, the area, which is the village that's kind of at the center of the southern part of the Côte de Jura, 45 minutes or almost an hour, because there's not major roads, it's a lot of tiny windy roads and a lot of tiny villages. And, that's part of like the charm of the Jura, is that it's, there's nothing really commercial there. In a lot of wine regions in France, in Burgundy or whatever, there's big cities and big commercial things. Arbois is the biggest town in the area, the wine region area.
Looking at all the pictures of the Jura, like it doesn't look like it's a lot of like flat land that's easy to farm on a large industrial scale. It's like it's just not if it's not an easy place to make large quantities of wine easily and cheaply. So
it's not. And also you have to consider that if you're talking to people in France, right, who are not a natural wine fan or who are not like really deep wine people, and you ask them what they know of Jura wine, they tell you about Vin Jaune, the yellow wine, which is like a very strange style that, the world as a whole is not necessarily like accustomed to drinking. And Vin de Paille, which, it's funny because all these people in natural wine, know the Jura, but they don't know Vin de Paille, which is the wine that's aged on straw and made into a sweet wine, because it's not really there's a lot of sulfur in wines with a lot of sugar in it. So natural wine producers don't really make it anymore. But, this is a region whose reputation is wines that are very obscure, that people don't have that much interest in. If you talk to even somebody who knew a lot about wine, let's say 20, 30 years ago, they would basically not realize that there was red wine in the Jura. That was considered a real afterthought. The region was really known for Vin Jaune and Sauvignon. And so, part of the revolution of the Jura was people being interested in obscure grape varieties, right? Trousseau and Poussard and Sauvignon as a thing that I think, the modern wine world has gotten like interested in funny varieties. And, I think that one of the things that the natural wine movement in Jura did as a global influence was light red wine, see-through red wine. I think that was, that's the nature of Poussard and Trousseau. They're very thin skinned grapes. They don't have a lot of color. We're talking about a region that is, at the foothills of the Alps. It's the best way to get to the Jura, by the way, is to fly into Geneva and drive over the mountain. And then as soon as you get over the mountain, you're into the Jura. It's much easier to get there that way than from Paris or somewhere else. So we're also talking about a subclimate that is cool. And so, even in bigger vintages, you're getting 12% alcohol wines. So ripeness and color extraction and all that kind of stuff is fresh, a lot of acidity in both the reds and the whites, very little color in the reds. And that light red wine style kind of became synonymous with natural wine. And you see people all over the world figuring out how to make light red wine. You see Frank Cornelissen making Susukaru in Etna. To some degree, that wine is influenced by Jura wine, by Pierre Auvernois. You talk to the guys in the south of France who are trying to do these really light red wines. They tell you, it comes from the Jura. They're trying to make Jura wine in a certain way. So this tiny little area with a category that was basically, uninteresting or unknown to the wine world became one of the most influential styles in the entire natural wine movement. And I find that to be an interesting thing. And I think that's part of why people love and revere and are so interested in the Jura. Do you have should I keep talking? Oh, I think you're on mute, Ned.
I keep muting myself since I'm out here. My original plan with this, it's always hard for me to get like large quantities of wines from the Jura. I usually never have a whole lot of like any one thing. So I'd been sort of thinking about doing a seminar like this for a while, and then got my original plan was to do the Jura and the Savoie, and then in the process of like reading about it and putting the handout together and everything and stuff like that, it's kind of just turned into the Jura. I have one wine from the Savoie here. I have a Jacquard from Crouet, but I'm just gonna like leave that until the end, and let's just keep on talking about the Jura.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I read, and I guess I've seen, and read and seen that Chardonnay and Pinot Noir have become more and more sort of common in the Jura over the past, like, I don't know, 30, 40 years. I read that Chardonnay is the most planted grape, and like Pinot Noir has like slowly become a little bit more common now. One of the wines that everybody has, the second wine, little sample bottle number 2, is the Domaine de la Pente Chardonnay 2015, the Chardonnay Fontenelle from 2015. So why don't we jump in and start drinking that? Arbois. So the Arbois is the largest AOC in the Jura, right? It's like 50% of the like vineyards, something approximately like that?
I have no idea, but probably.
You can, yeah. I'll stake my name on that. You don't have to.
I believe that. I believe you. Yeah, Arbois is the capital of winemaking Jura. Jurançon is the big city in Jura, but it's about an hour away from the vineyard area. But Arbois is like also like the if you go into downtown Arbois, the big wineries have little wine stores there. Like the way that they do in Burgundy. And it's really like the commercial center of the Jura. And so, yeah, Chardonnay is planted more and more. They actually have a version of Chardonnay there called Melon à Queue Rouge. It says it has like a red tail. And it's a slightly different variation of Chardonnay. Some Chardonnay that you find is planted with that. Some is more a different clone that's more similar to like a Dijon clone. Domaine de la Pente is sort of a funny winery. When Domaine de la Pente opened in the 60s, and the owner wanted to make only Vin Jaune. And so he had the entire his entire 30 hectare of land planted to Sauvignon and made an entire winery of just Vin Jaune. And of course, Vin Jaune is a 6-year and 3-month élevage. He did that for like 15 years and nobody was buying it, or he was selling a good amount of it, but there wasn't a big enough market for his entire production to be it. So he started to transfer some of the vines over to Chardonnay and to the red grapes, and now has like sort of a broader mix. A nice thing about that winery, first, they've been biodynamic for a really long time, which is great. But this is more of a classical style Jura wine, and they do very long élevage. So you have the 2015 there. It's the current release. We just got that, so that's like 36 or 48 months in 500 liter old style barrique or something like that. And so Jura is somewhat divided, right? Like there's the conventional camp, then there's the natural classical camp, which I consider the wine you're drinking to be in. And then there's like the, really natty wine camp. And that's like Auvernois, Octavin, and, Brière Houillon and people like that. So it's another great thing about the Jura. It offers like a big, broad group of styles.
Yeah, this is beautiful. This is it's very rich. It's very rich, kind of lush. It's like it got a tiny bit, like it shows its age a tiny bit. Like there's a little teeny bit of like an oxidative sort of like nutty thing to it, but it's really slight. This is drinking great.
Their cellars are really cold, Élevage, in barrel like that should happen slow. Their wines should be good for decades, really. Every year is built to last.
It's it's a little bit, it's grippy. It's like ripe, rich fruit. Also like peaches, a little bit of like pineapple, but then also sort of like food. It's a little bit like toasted baked goods and stuff like that. There's a little hint of like almonds in it.
Is it a little fizzy?
Yeah, totally forgot what else I was going to ask about it.
Yeah, but they're in the center of Arbois, so they're they part of like the establishment. Yes, Matthew,
yes, please.
Hey, I was just wondering. Oh, hold on one sec. Sorry, give me one second. I was just wondering that, like, when I'm thinking about wines to pair with wines from the Jura, or food to pair with wine from the Jura, I always land on like seafood and like fish, which is so funny because it's like you don't feel like when you're there, you're not like that close to fish. So I was wondering what you guys think for food pairings and like what. I love Domaine de la Pine. I like Zev. I got to like visit. I think Tony connected me with Laura, and I got to stay there with my mom, and it was just such a great moment in my life. But bringing it back, we live in Maine. We serve like a lot of lobster and crab and fish, and it's those wines. Like I love pairing light red wine that's acidic with lobster, which is not something that's usually done, I guess, in restaurants. I don't know. So I was just wondering what people were thinking about food pairings with this wine.
Well, hello. I'm so glad that you got to go to Domaine de la Pine. It's a beautiful, cool place. And that sounds like a really nice experience. First, they eat fish there. I think if you're thinking about the structure of the wine, right? This is wine with a lot of acidity, fairly low in alcohol, fairly high in acidity, fairly like clean, which is a natural mix with fish. If you're going to talk about what's classical in the region, for example, that's sort of a different thing. The Jura is where Comté, which is, in my opinion, the best sort of hard cheese in the world. It's just the absolute best. It's so good. And you can get it, especially in the Jura, you can get them 36-month age. And they get these little crystals in them. And, a white Jura wine with a little bit of Comté is like one of these classic, amazing experiences. The other thing that they make there is Vacherin Mont d'Or, which is a winter cheese. Comes in like a little wheel that's held by, bark, basically cedar bark, I think. And you warm it up and it becomes like this cheese soup. And you basically take like sausage and potatoes and you spoon it and like drizzle it over sausage and potatoes.
It's like Harbison in America.
It's like, right. Yes. And that's like one of the greatest things. When I'm in the Jura every year around January and February, and that's when that cheese comes out. And it's just like the best kind of like cold weather food. So I think it's really great with cheese. I think the acidity cuts through things. They're acid driven wines. Those are designed for food. They're good with so many things. I wouldn't be drinking any Jura wine with steak or red meat or anything like heavy like that. But basically, it's a great way to start a meal. A bottle of Jura wine, especially Sauvignon, I think is the one that's really like the angular white wine. That would go great with all that kind of stuff, especially Maine style cuisine.
Yeah. I can imagine a lot of like lamb and like chicken preparations like there traditionally. And like, do they have potatoes there? Do they eat a lot of potatoes?
They eat a lot of potatoes. In France, potatoes are considered like your vegetable.
Yeah.
you know, there's a classic dish called poulet au vin jaune,
Mhm.
you know, which is like coq au vin, but instead of regular wine, you put vin jaune in it, which is costly, but is very, very good. So that's another classic dish. So yeah, chicken, slow roast chicken is a nice, also classic sort of thing.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Oh, right. I was just wondering, I was going to ask. So I know, I mean, I didn't even talk about it, but you know, like Jura, it's the Jura Mountains, like they're subalpine on the way to the Alps. It's sort of in between Switzerland and Burgundy and stuff like that. Um, uh, what's the climate like? Is oh, that sounds great. Vin Jaune and a classic French
Yeah,
omelet.
not hot at all. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I would be into that. Um, like it's like 800 to 1300 feet above sea level, something like that, ranging is what I was reading. I know
The
it's
Jura?
colder. The Jura, like where the vineyards
No,
are. No,
no, no.
cool. Correct me.
350, 400
350 to 400 feet or meters?
feet.
Feet.
Uh, Maybe meters, huh?
Okay. Okay. I think that sounds the meters. That sounds about right. And like
It's
that sounds
just
right in meters. Yeah.
above uh, Bone. It's
Yep.
like basically the same elevation as Central Burgundy.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Same elevation as Central Burgundy. Um, how different is the climate from Burgundy? I know it's colder in the winter, but like what's the like what are the summers like? Are the summers hot?
Yeah, summers are hot.
Okay.
Summers are hot. You know, there's kind of like a cool breeze that comes off the mountains.
Mhm.
You know, you don't get full ripeness in general. You know, part of the difficulty of the climate of the Jura is frost. You know, they have frost almost every year. 2021 was another year where a lot of damage was done via frost. So yeah, it's cold, and you know, vines flower, and you know, there's still like plenty of freezes left to go through April and May. So that's one of the big challenges from a farming and climate perspective. Um, you know, it's humid, it rains, there's a lot of mildew. That's really tough. Um, you know, and it's very different. Like I said, it's a 50-minute drive, you know, from the north to the south, and the climate in the southern part of the Jura is very, very different. You know, it's right against the mountains, so the elevation of the vineyards themselves are not, in fact, that high. But you know, it still gets a lot of climatic mountain effect in the sense that you know there's big swings in temperature all the time. I'm good for like another half hour or so, but I
Cool.
have to get into a car. I'm on my way to
That's
the
fine.
airport.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. That's perfect. Let's jump into the Domaine de la Pente, Capitaine Arbois, like Capitaine Rouge.
One of the things that Laura was, when I went on my tour there, that I thought was so interesting was she had talked about how the vines are stressed in that on their properties. Maybe I'm misusing the word, but they're like when the vines are striving for water or striving against the weather, the result is that the fruit ends up being really delicious, and that always like stuck with me. You know, I think what like when the weather is perfect all the time, like maybe that doesn't actually result in the most delicious grape. I don't know if that was just something I remembered that I thought was interesting.
I mean, I think like from what I know, that's like pretty broadly correct. That like generally when like vines are more stressed, they like generally broadly speaking, it limits their yields and also like they put more effort into into the grapes and you get like more interesting grapes, more interesting flavors from them. So yeah, that makes sense. And a place like the Jura, you know, I'm sure that the Jura has, I mean, it has like huge temperature changes throughout the year, but then it also has huge temperature changes like day to day. and probably also from day to night too, because you have the influence from the mountains, and you also have the influence from, I should go back to that map and look and see how far away like the lakes are, like Lake Geneva and stuff like that. But like there are large bodies of fresh water right there, I think relatively nearby. All right, maybe I'm wrong looking at the map here. Maybe they're not actually that close, but still, yeah, you have the influence of the mountains on them.
Yeah, significant influence of the mountains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it's quite close to, it's quite close to the ski regions of the Alps. So, it's right there.
All right, cool. So
you're doing the Capitan?
Yep, the Capitan.
Okay. The Capitan, I think, is do you have a tech sheet? It's mostly trousseau.
I do have a tech sheet. It's I think it's they say, they could be wrong, but I think that they say that it is Pinot Noir and Poulsard. 60.
Pinot Noir and Poulsard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Poulsard is, maybe I'll just give a little bit of information about the different grape varieties.
Mm-hmm.
Poulsard is a funny grape. It's a little bit oval shaped, and the skins on it are like a little bit waxy. So it's actually really hard to extract color from it. The reason that one's like a real red wine is because of the Pinot Noir influence. The Capitan, the name of that particular cuvee is the name of that vineyard site. Most of the wines in that winery, they name after the vineyard site. So that vineyard just has both varieties in it, so they do a co-ferment. Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah, it smells a little bit spicy. A bunch of like bright, fresh, sort of like raspberry, like tart red cherry. But also, like,
for me, that's like that's not the style we're talking about. We're talking about like Jura red wine, that like really light thing. Capitan is like a little bit darker than what we're like normally talking about with that really fresh style. And of course, I say that's because of the Pinot Noir, most likely. And also, classical style winery. They're not like, the more natural wineries, or the more natural styled wineries are talking to a slightly different market. People who are okay with like a red wine that you can see through or find that exciting. These guys are trying to talk to a more classical market, so they're, have to make something like a little bit more dense.
Right. Yeah.
But still delicious. Still also probably 12.5% alcohol or something like that. And nice and fresh.
Yep. It is 12.5% alcohol, and it is really nice and fresh. It does have really bright. It's bright, fresh red fruit, but it's not like super light. It's like fresh cherry. Like it has ripeness to it. And then it also has like some sort of aromatic, like herbal sort of qualities to like the mid palate, to the back of it. It's pretty. There's a floral component too.
Yeah, and as you're saying, earlier about volumes, getting Domaine de la Pinte was like a big thing because, they have 30 hectare. To have 30 hectare in the Jura is like pretty unheard of. You talk to like, about Octavin or somebody like that, or some of the other producers we're working with. Octavin has 4.5 hectare. We work with a number of wineries that have 2. So, Baron Fos that we work with in the south, which is right next to Genva, I think they have 3.5. So, we're often getting, 90 or 120 bottles of a single wine for the entire United States. So, it's great to work with Domaine de la Pinte, a winery that we can, that makes all the different grape varieties, makes a bunch of the different styles. And, it's not like we're getting giant quantities from them, but we're able to get, 25 cases or something.
Yeah. how spread out are their vineyards? If they've, you know, if they've got like 30 plus hectares, are they like all pretty together, or in order to put together that many hectares, are they working with like a lot of different little parcels spread out?
Yeah, I think it's split between 50 plus parcels. You know,
Was
and that
was that a
happens
was that a 5-0 or a 1-5?
5-0.
5.
Yeah. You know, and that happens partially because just acquiring vineyards isn't like that simple. You know what I mean? Like you can't build, you know, they've been building to a 30-hectare winery since 1962 or whatever when they were founded. You know, and you can't just go out and buy 30 hectare of, you know, contiguous Jura vineyards. It's like that. It's not like it's a thing for sale. You know, so you buy a hectare here, you buy a half a hectare here, you buy, you know, a quarter of a hectare there, and you do it over a long period of time. So you end up with a estate that large. You know, you talk to Stéphane Tissot, who's got up to 50 something, you know, and just every opportunity, anybody selling a vineyard, you know, in the Jura, he'll buy it and convert it. So, you know, convert it into organics.
Yeah, this is only really vaguely related, but yeah, I imagine that most of the land that can be farmed, that can be vineyards, is already vineyards there. Funny little thing, I was reading somewhere before this that done genetic testing of Sauvignon grapes in the Jura, and they've done genetic testing of like seeds that they have unearthed from like whatever chateaus or wineries in the Middle Ages, and that Sauvignon that's grown right now in the Jura is genetically identical to what was grown in the Middle Ages like 1,000 years ago. And so they're pretty confident that people have been, I mean, people have certainly been making wine in the Jura for a couple of thousand years, because it was Celtic, and you know, like vines were brought there from the Romans and stuff like that. But or were already there, but that people have been growing like, at least Sauvignon, and they've been making effectively Vin Jaune, you know, since at least the Middle Ages, and people have been drinking it, you know, probably in pretty similar to the form that it is now since then.
So let me just say about everything I know about Sauvignon and Vin Jaune. First, there's not one type of Sauvignon. There's like 4 or 5 that are grown in the Jura. There's Sauvignon Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, Sauvignon Rose. There's a bunch of, you know, and these are like, you know, minutia clones from each other.
Of course,
but there's a bunch of
groups. Yeah,
of course there are, and they are, in fact, and one of them is the exact same grape as Traminer. So, you know, Gewürztraminer is a type of Traminer, and then Sauvignon is in fact Traminer, which is in the aromatic variety family. And the reason that Sauvignon doesn't generally taste like the way that we think of with like this like really floral aromatic styles is because of like the lack of heavy ripeness, because of those mountain influences. You don't get to that kind of phenolic characteristic of really floral without that. And then for anybody that doesn't know, Vin Jaune is Sauvignon, this particular grape variety, aged for 6 years and 3 months in a barrel that's not topped up. And what that does is, you know, when you're, you know, normally when you age wine, you have to put a little bit of wine, you know, every week or 2 weeks, because it evaporates out of the barrel. So to leave a barrel for 6 years and 3 months, you know, you lose like 2/3, or not, I'm sorry, not 2/3, you lose over 1/3 of the barrel. You're left with about 2/3. And as that happens, it grows, and in this particular region, right, this is a thing that does grow in a number of regions, but it particularly functions well in this area. It grows what they call a voile, which is like a white mold on top of the wine. And basically that white mold protects the wine from oxygen. It eats oxygen and the mold, and then it sort of shits out a, you know, byproduct into the wine. And that is what that taste is that you have in Vin Jaune that's very distinctive. It's the byproduct of this mold eating oxygen. It's the same thing that you have in that they call flor in sherry. You know, sherry has alcohol added to it and is, you know, mostly made from grapes, a lot of chemicals, and very different process. Vin Jaune is sort of like the purest version of one of these wines aged under fall. Is that our segue to tasting Vin Jaune now?
Yeah, I was gonna do this as the final wine, but let's just, because we're talking about it, let's drink the Vin Jaune now.
Okay. What vintage is that?
2009.
2009. Great. Oh, that's Bordeaux. Okay. Yeah. So Bordeaux is, you know, you talk about wine in Jura for a few thousand years. Bordeaux has been making wine in the same family in the same building since 20 something. I forget. It says on the bottle. Maybe. What exactly it is. Am I overstating it? Am I right there? And they're very, very traditional. They do their Vin Jaune in, you know, even larger barrels, and they often age it an extra year because they think that gives it a little bit more character. And so, yeah, 2009 is the current vintage. You know, they probably bottled that in 2017, and then aged it for a few years before they shipped it out. So, you know, Vin Jaune's not cheap, but it is quite a process and pretty unique in the world.
Great for cooking.
So that's not Vin Jaune, but so that is Vin Jaune. I'm sorry, but that's Chateau Chalon. So Chateau Chalon is the one appellation in the Jura that is an elevated version of Vin Jaune. So you know how you have a system in Burgundy where you have Bourgogne Rouge, and then you have, let's say, Volnay, and then you have Volnay Premier Cru, and you have a Grand Cru, and it goes through like these sort of stages. Chateau Chalon is this one village that is considered the Grand Cru, the best vineyard site for Vin Jaune. And it's a medieval village on a hill. It's an incredibly beautiful place to go visit. I think the entire appellation is something like, 40 hectare. And that's split amongst, 30 different owners. So very few people have, even 1 hectare of that particular vineyard. So that's a special one. And, we have the 2009 regular Vin Jaune from them, where the grapes come from Arbois. They taste side, and they're incredibly different. And an amazing thing about that particular winery is, they have kept 300 bottles, every single wine that they've made back to 1850. So, the Chateau Chalon that you have in your hand from 1927, 1936, 1947. I've had a couple from the 50s. If you go there at the winery, you can buy them. It's like 5,000 euros for the 1947, but if you want it, it's for sale. I can bring it in. But you can also buy the ones from the 80s and the 90s for not that much. That's my spiel on it. You're on mute, then.
So what were you saying? Because you went sort of mute for some of that. They have vintages going back to like the 1850s. Was that?
Yeah. They keep 300 bottles of basically the Vin Jaune, the Chateau Chalon, the red and the white. They keep, normally about 300 bottles.
Wait a minute. Wait, there's Chateau Chalon red?
No. I listed 4 different wines. They keep the Chateau Chalon, they keep the Vin Jaune, then they keep the red wine, then they keep the white wine. You're right, there's no red Chateau Chalon. But in the best vintages, they keep 300 bottles of each, and they'll start selling them 10 years later. And they'll sell them bottle by bottle. If you look, there's like a Zacky's auction that happened a couple of years ago that had a huge set of the old vintages. And they're kind of the, as far as I think anybody knows, they're the only heritage of aged wine in their cellar. So it's another place, if you're in Jura ever.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Yeah, it was great. In reading about all of these, reading that like Vin Jaune, I love the complexity of this, that Vin Jaune is not an appellation, but Vin Jaune is a wine that's controlled by the government. but it's made in all of these different appellations, like Côte de Jura makes Vin Jaune, and Etoile makes Vin Jaune, and Chateau Chalon, but the other, like, it's all controlled by the individual AOCs, so they all have slightly different rules between all of them. So like Chateau Chalon, the grapes have to be like slightly riper in order to be well, Vin Jaune, in order to be Chateau Chalon, but Chateau Chalon doesn't have to say, or doesn't say Vin Jaune on the label. You just have to know that Chateau Chalon is all Vin Jaune. All of it is made from Sauvignon. And then when you get Vin Jaune from other AOCs in the Jura, they actually say Vin Jaune on the label and stuff like that. And it's like, you just have to figure it out. But this is beautiful. It does smell like sherry. It does have that, what is the aromatic identifier? Solanon?
I don't know that word.
I don't know.
But
it's something the internet told me.
They come in a funny bottle, you know, they're in a 620 milliliter bottle called a clava.
Right.
Which is, you know, a bottle that was like designed just for Vin Jaune 500 years ago. So, you know, you can figure out if it's, you know, for AOC laws, they're complicated. You have to memorize all this shit, whether or not a, you know, Chalon, you know, Chateau Chalon is Vin Jaune, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, if it's in that funny little squat bottle,
right,
you know that it's a yellow wine.
That's a good point. Yeah. If the wine is in, if you run into a wine, how do I pin myself? If you run into a wine that's in this size shape bottle, then you know that it's Vin Jaune. And the point, it's 62 centiliters, which supposedly is what is left from a liter of wine after 6 years in a barrel. So because legally Vin Jaune, you can't bottle it until 6 years and 3 months after the harvest. So allowing approximately 3 months for like initial, like primary fermentation, pressing and stuff like that. And then 6 years in barrel, slowly evaporating. So you're left with like 62%. According to Jean Bordy, they say about 40% evaporates, but they're aging theirs for longer in barrel anyway. So yeah.
Realistic choice with Vin Jaune, whether or not you want to make it in the cellar or in the attic. You know, so the colder the environment of your Vin Jaune, the less evaporation you have, the warmer your environment, the more. So there's a lot of people who have like different schools of thought on what they think is the best method.
Wow. I actually couldn't pay attention to any of that because I actually just tasted this and I was just sort of like, wow, there's so many different things happening here all at once. It's like woodsy and smoky, and there is something that tastes like Japanese food, like sushi that I had a couple nights ago. That's like, wow. Yeah, this is really cool. Oh, those are photos from Domaine de la Pente that Matt is posting. It's cleaner and clearer to me tasting than sherry is, than any Fino sherry probably that I've had, because it's not fortified.
Right. I think the alcohol in sherry really changes the characteristic of it. You know, I think you get like, you know, it's pure wine in there as opposed to like that extra manipulation that you get from the brandy or whatever.
Yeah, but then it's like, this has got a really, it's both like meaty. It reminds me of like really the flavor, the gamey sort of flavor of like a dry aged meat, like a 45-day dry aged, like, you know, whatever, choose your strip steak or whatever. but at the same time, it's like citrusy and like lemony and stuff like that, and almondy and smoky and everything just all at once. I feel like I've got to do that because I know that there's going to be people watching this video that aren't actually drinking the wines.
Yeah, well, it's a unique effort to go get a bottle of Vin Jaune at some point. Not get it all. So it's another one of like the beautiful eccentricities of the Jura.
Yeah. Wow. It's so clean. Like the flavors linger for so long. It's a little nutty, but not as much as sherry. It's just so clean, and it's a lot more like uplifting and lighter than sherry is, but still with like this like intensity of flavor. It's really awesome. I'm very glad that I still have like a third of a bottle of this here.
Well, and another thing about Vin Jaune is you don't have to drink it all in one day. You can put the cork back in it, put it in the fridge, and drink it over a week or whatever.
Or cook some chicken in it.
Or cook, or make a really expensive cocoa vin Jaune.
All right. Well, now I'm going to go back to the trousseau.
Okay. Well, I'm sure everybody will survive the palate shock. Yeah,
honestly,
trousseau,
the cool thing about that, like the Vin Jaune was intense and there's a lot there, but it's not such a heavy, like alcoholic or powerful wine that like, I don't feel like there shouldn't be terrible palate shock.
Yeah, I think so. People traditionally will have Vin Jaune before dinner, with cheese or whatever. So it's possible to have Vin Jaune and then a red wine. You guys are going to prove it right now. So trousseau is a little different than Poulsard. It's smaller berries, a little bit more pigment in the skins. Kind of has a different, overall characteristic. It's maybe like if you were to just put it on a scale from Poulsard to Pinot Noir, it would be somewhere like halfway in between. And that too goes through kind of a similar élevage. They put everything in large, well-used barrels. And by large, I just mean 500 liter, not like 2,000 or whatever. So bigger than a berry.
Yeah, this smells juicy. Smells juicier, like more like vivid, sort of like raspberry. A little bit more tannin. Yeah, raspberry is very fresh. It's like raspberry, strawberry, a little bit more tannin, but it's still a really like light, fresh, fun red wine.
Yeah, it's more tannin when compared to like Poulsard, but it's still a Jura wine.
Yeah. Just more tannin than the Pinot Noir like Poulsard blend, but yeah, it's still a really like, it's got a ton of energy. It's like very, like vivid and vivacious and fresh and stuff like that. Like it's got intensity and it's got focus and crispness. But it's not a like heavy, aggressive red wine.
Yeah.
How different are the soils up in Arbois from like the rest of the Jura? I know I read that the soil is like the mountains are limestone, so it's sort of like a limestone base, but then you have clay in some places, clay lower down, and then you have like marl in some places higher up, and then you get gravel here and there. And
pretty much everybody's going to say Al Giro Calcaire, which is clay and limestone. But of course, there's variation. In the south, there's a lot more blue clay around Rotalier as opposed to red clay that you find around Arbois. Yeah, it's a lot of clay, a lot of limestone, very little bit of marl.
all right, cool. Is there anything that you feel like I should have talked about or we should have talked about that I haven't gotten to?
I don't know. I think we kind of got it. You know, that the Jura is a fun place. You know, there's so many different wines. There's so many different like little producers. It's a hard place to get wine from just because there's so few bottles and it's very popular. But you know, that's kind of the search of wine. That's part of the joy of it. So no, I think we kind of covered a lot of stuff. Anybody have any questions that they want to throw out?
Yeah, I was just looking through my handout, and we basically, without you looking at it or us talking about it or anything, we covered everything in the handout. We like went through the particulars of Vin Jaune and stuff, and I have all the grapes in my handout with like sort of basic like what each of them are, plus the grape. I list the grape varieties as like the 5 primary grape varieties plus Pinot Gris, because it seems like Pinot Gris is sort of here and there, and it's allowed in Cremant, but that's about it. It's not allowed in like the AOC wine.
So in the north around Arbois, there's only the 5 varieties that you've listed and that are known from the Jura. In the south around Rotalier, there are a lot of different ones, and there are some, you know, they're not allowed using them. You're making the wine of Vin France. So if you talk to Genva, for example, he makes a bunch of wines from around there, but like, you know, the variety that sometimes they don't quite know what it is. So, you know, that sort of thing happens. But for the most part, like you say, it's the primary 5.
Yep. Cool. All right. Great. Well, thanks a lot, Zev. Where are you flying to?
I'm in Florida. I'm flying back to New York.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, have a great flight.
Thanks.
Yeah, hopefully I will see you sometime soon. We'll be able to travel again. I will come down to New York and it'll be awesome.
This is my first time leaving New York since COVID. So I got the vaccine, feeling undeadly, and you know, out traveling around the world a little again.
Yep. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Everybody, I guess I'll just stay out here for now, and I will open this bottle. I'll pour some Jacquard and talk a tiny bit about the Savoie. So thanks a lot, Zev. There, I will unmute myself. Yeah, I guess I came around to the conclusion that probably that for some reason the Jura and the Savoie seem to sort of kind of get like put together or connected in the broader wine world. Like as I was getting ready for this and talking to people, that was the case. But now that I've read more about the Jura and the Savoie and everything, it doesn't seem like that actually really makes any sense at all. Because culturally, the Jura feels very like it has its own strong culture and sense of place and everything and stuff like that, but it's very French. It's very Celtic. And then the Savoie is French, but the Savoie is like right on Lake Geneva. Is the only difference between Sauvignon, that's Savoie, and a Vin Jaune made from the same grape. Savoie. If it's Sauvignon, okay. So question here from Michael: is the only difference between a Sauvignon that's been aged Savoie, so under veil, and a Vin Jaune that's made from the same grape Savoie, the time under veil? Probably. I can't really think of anything else. As long as it is like Sauvignon there in the Jura. There's I should dig more into like what technically legally is Vin Jaune, but you know, some of it just comes down to like where the vineyards are, and I'm sure that there are rules about like production per hectare and things like that. So you could hypothetically have Sauvignon that's Savoie that is from grapes grown like outside of one of the Jura AOCs, something like that. But like still within like the Jura, but just not within like, you know, because like looking at that map, there's a lot of land that must have vineyards there that doesn't fall into L'Etoile or into like the Côte de Jura or the Arbois or something like that. So you have probably stuff from outside of appellation, things that aren't aged for the full 6 years. And that's about all I can think of. Maybe hypothetically like chaptalization or adding alcohol to it or something like that. But then you might not even be wine anymore. You might be like vin pale. So, so the Savoie feels like it is much more like it's a different culture. It's connected to Switzerland a little bit more. Yeah, the Chardonnay did have some of the same notes. I think that probably came just from like its time aging in barrel, and like expressing the same terroir. I used to get years ago. Oh, okay, wait. Also, so Vin Jaune, it has to be like time in barrel and that the barrel is not topped up, because that's the only way that you get the evaporation and the yeast growing on the surface and stuff. You could absolutely age Sauvignon in a barrel for 6 years, but if you kept topping up the barrel, then it wouldn't be Vin Jaune because it wouldn't grow a veil of yeast and it wouldn't oxidize in the same way. So there's that. I used to get a Chardonnay from Laurent Bonnois, business partner of Zev, actually, that was Chardonnay from the Jura, from Arbois, aged in barrels that they had previously made Vin Jaune in, and it was aged for like 2 or 3 years in barrel. And so it had a bunch of the same characteristics and flavors and stuff like that as Vin Jaune and like the Chardonnay that we tasted today. And that's part of it. It was because they were using barrels that had Vin Jaune in it. So that like, even though it wasn't oxidizing, evaporating, and developing that covering of yeast on the surface, those bacteria and like that yeast was present in the barrel and still influencing the wine. So you get those flavors in a bunch of other wines from the region. Poor old Savoie, coming back to it again here now. So this is Jacques. So I thought, I was led to believe that it made sense to equate these, and now I don't think it does at all, really, because the climate is different. The Savoie is significantly further south. I think it's about the same elevation, but here comes some kind of large diesel thing. Trash truck. So their Savoie and the Jura are about the same elevation, and they're both up against the Alps. They're both up against the border with Switzerland, but the Savoie is more Swiss in like it's different culturally. It's not as like purely Celtic as the Jura. And then also the Savoie, I think, has more influence from the lakes that are there because they are right by like Lake Geneva. I'm actually going to do screen share and go over here to one of these maps, the map that's not open, this one. So this is the Savoie, and so you see like there's Lake Geneva up here, and this is Switzerland, and then you have Doncier, and you have whatever this lake is, Lac du Bouget, it looks like. So I think there's a whole bunch of different things that really sort of like sets the Savoie apart and makes it different. It's similar in that it's like up in the foothills of the mountains, and there are the actual like square kilometers devoted to vineyards are very small, and it's all spread out and stuff. And so like it's hard to find any wineries that are very big and actually have any meaningful quantity of wine for sale. It's mostly like very small production stuff, and hard to get wines from there. There's not a lot of wine produced somewhere. Oh, reading in the Jancis Robinson book that this map came from, the Savoie is about the same size as Bordeaux, but the Savoie produces 1/50th as much wine as Bordeaux. So this is Jacquer. It's 2016, so it's an older vintage from Chelière de la Baraterie. It is, I'll just go to this web page here. This guy, Julian Viana, who was from here, went away to school and then came back, took over a 1 hectare vineyard from another winemaker when he was 20 and started making wine. It's similar to the Jura in that like it has its own grape varieties, it has its own culture. It's just that all of that is different from the Jura. They grow Jacquer, Altesse, Malvoisie, Mondeuse, like all these other grape varieties that are indigenous to this area. There's Julien, and here are a bunch of the French Alps, the foothills of the French Alps. I bet that's Mondeuse. But yeah, you can see it's subalpine here. Smells totally different. This is not oxidative. This is the first not oxidative white wine of this seminar. Fresher. Yeah, this is like classic Savoie Jacquer to me. It's clean, it has nice acidity. It's not super aromatic. Like that's just not what Jacquer is. It has some salt, some salinity on the mid palate, and some nice sort of like, it's not quite like lemon, it's more like star fruit or something like that, or like, I don't know, maybe like white peach that's not super ripe. It has some nice fruit on the mid palate, but it's sort of like it's a little bit of like a less expressive kind of white wine, but at the same time like focused, and like tastes like a high elevation, like sort of alpine wine to me. There's a focus and a purity that that the wine has. This is also organic. A little bit like pear, maybe. Cool. All right, well, boy, so many trucks right now. If anything, this has just sort of like whetted my appetite for more wines from the Jura. So I'll be seeing what else I can sort of track down. My plan, actually, Zev thought that he had magnums of some like Sauvignon in stock. And so my plan was to actually use this magnum as the 6th wine for the seminar today. But when I ordered it, then it turned out that they didn't actually have it in inventory like they thought they did, but it had disappeared and the warehouse couldn't find it. So maybe in the future at some point I will dust that off. And I haven't figured out what I'm going to do for next week, but I'm going to go figure that out right now and wander around in the warehouse. And then probably the week after that, so 2 weeks from now, I'm finally going to do the long-awaited Portuguese seminar that I've been talking about since the very beginning of me doing these seminars, because I've accumulated, this whole time, I've been slowly accumulating more and more Portuguese wines and Portuguese wine books and stuff like that. So I think I finally have my crap together to do a Portuguese. It's that same trash truck. To do that, to actually finally do a Portuguese wine seminar. So thanks a lot. Thanks for listening to me and Zev talk about the Jura. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Bye.